Hello and welcome to Enago's webinar titled How AI is Impacting Academic Publishing, Guide for Authors and Journal Editors, in collaboration with Trinka, an advanced artificial intelligence powered writing assistant. This session will aim to help researchers understand how they can assess and enhance the quality of their thesis using an AI powered language assistant tool. Before we begin, I would like to mention that you can send us your questions using the Questions tab in the control panel, and our expert speakers would be happy to answer all your queries at the end of the webinar. Today, we have with us our expert speakers, Dr. Stephen Huff and Mr. Rahul Kumar. Stephen is a published author with 20 plus years of experience in manifold scientific fields, including big data analytics, machine learning, algorithm development, laboratory management, and informatics research. After completing his PhD from the University of Houston, Dr. Huff continued his research pursuit as a research biological scientist at USAF Research Laboratory, followed by his appointment at Nobilis Inc. To date, Dr. Huff has published several research papers in high ranking journals and is also a recipient of 5 grants and multiple awards and scholarships. As a publication and training consultant at Enago Academy, Dr. Huff provides guidance to research scholars for a successful academic career. Rahul is a Bell certified medical editor and an entrepreneurial product professional, instrumental in developing Trinka. He has 7+ years of experience in academic publishing industry with expertise in editing, product development, and operations. He has conceptualized and built academia-focused AI products for authors and publishers. We extend a warm welcome to our speakers and thank them for joining us today. Before I hand over the mic to Stephen, I would like to give you all a brief introduction about Enago. We are the world's leading author service provider, and our author first, quality first approach ensures that our authors receive only the best quality output and excellent user experience at all times. This unrelenting focus on authors' needs means that we never compromise on our quality systems and processes at any cost. All our services are designed keeping in mind authors' need. Enago Academy is an author training platform that educates authors through several resources, including webinars as well as live workshop sessions. We also have an e-learning platform for researchers called Enago Learn, along with live one-on-one consultation platform called Enago Consult. Enago offers world-class services to researchers at different stages of their research career, such as two-editor system English language editing service, academic and non-academic translation service, manuscript preparation service, and publication support service. The Enago promise guarantees that a manuscript edited by us will never be rejected based on poor language. On a rare occasion, if rejection occurs, we will take full responsibility for re-editing the paper for resubmission at no additional cost. Enago's comprehensive after-sales services will support you at every step of the way until your manuscript is published. They are designed to take care of every need from the time you receive our main service until you are published. Enago's research communication service are designed to help you effectively present your research data. In case you are interested in any of these services, feel free to email at webinars@enago.com. We also have exciting discount offers for our webinar participants, details of which will be shared via chat box at the end of the session. Now, without any further delay, I will hand over the mic to Dr. Stephen.
Good morning, everyone. It's a glorious day here. I hope the same is true for you. We're going to be talking about 2 or 3 things that are very near and dear to my heart, publication and artificial intelligence, all right? So today we have 4 topics on the agenda: how AI is transforming the academic publishing landscape, how AI is assisting authors, how AI is assisting journal editors, and popular AI-based tools to improve quality of publications. So AI in the publishing landscape is, as many things related to artificial intelligence, a nascent business. So it has an average growth rate on the publication side of articles anywhere between 5 and 6% per year. Typically, these articles are being published in one of 2 classes of journals: peer-reviewed, non-peer-reviewed. But it is critical to ensure in either case, if you are the author, in my opinion, that these articles are evaluated rigorously, consistently, and efficiently. So previously, like many things that are being replaced this way, this was done manually by human beings. But artificial intelligence has many tools that can help here, and we're starting to see these tools being utilized. So the primary applications for these tools will be discussed in the presentation to follow. But essentially, they're aiding the publication of higher quality manuscripts, and they're doing that in a much more efficient way. At least that's the idea. Also, the tools aid the author as well, because many of these tools can be used to increase the efficiency of your literature search and the internet, to correlate and coordinate those articles together so that they make more sense without you having to do this manually, which is a tedious task that we've all done if we've written something like a dissertation or a thesis. And of course, you also have available databases that are also curated in some cases with AI that can aid your efforts as well. So some novel applications of AI that are worthy of mentioning are a couple of different modes of operation. So 1, classification of documents; 2, within those documents, extraction of entities; and then finally, the enhancement of discoverability. So the classification of documents is fairly straightforward in a manual sense. You simply read them all and then decide how you want to break down those categories, whatever those classifications are, and then you do that. When I wrote my dissertation many years ago, I did it electronically, but I also had a very big binder with indexed tabs in it so that I could keep track of the articles according to whatever system that I needed to review them, to refer them to as I was writing. One of the things that's really important when you're doing this, of course, is to be able to recognize within the documents what entities are interacting, what are the subject matter as well, who's discussing what, and not just from a person point of view, a human point of view, but within the context of the article. What's the focus, the subject matter of the article, what's being acted against it. Also, the advances in semantic search, which I'm sure you're all familiar with by using tools like Google, are really they've been impressive for a long time. But when you apply them to a literature review, they're especially helpful because there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and some of it's curated, some of it isn't. So it's not to dismiss those non-curated items, because these publications often require exorbitant fees to get them into the journal. But at the same time, there is a difference of quality. So the advances on the publishing side and semantic publishing are, I think, equally promising, and that is the ability to put your article out there in a way that makes sure that the people that need it most get it. And when you're talking about a plethora of journals out there, this can be a very challenging thing to do. So these tools are designed to assist both authors and publishers, obviously. And I think that from my experience as a scientist and working with many scientists in the field, there's really 2 kinds if you're taking this perspective. And the majority, the minority of my colleagues don't like to write. They like to do the cool stuff. That's working with the technology and the data. coming up with the findings. They tend to write because they have to get public, to get funding, to get these publications out the door. A lot of this work, by the way, is done by research assistants for that reason. And I find that in those cases, most of the time, since they're not writers, they tend to not write so well. And some of them don't write at all. And they need a lot of help with this. The other very small portion of scientists enjoy that part of the business probably more than anything else, and it reflects in their work. So if you're lucky and you're working on a collaborative team, you have a human being that's in that minority group, and they take over the editing for you. But if you, like many of my colleagues don't, these tools can provide great benefits. So they can, for example, look into your article and identify different kinds of errors and shortcomings. They do it a lot faster than a human being can. And the kinds of errors and shortcomings that they can identify is to assist the language quality. For example, a high quality scientific text, in my opinion, again, it is just my opinion, but I think it's a fairly well reflected opinion, is that it's written in the first person active voice. So you say, we did this, not this was done. And it takes credit for the work that you're doing, but it also makes sure that you're assigning the active label to the work that you're doing. When you use the passive voice, it sort of implies that anybody could have done the work. So also can be used to evaluate the integrity of the figures. There are, of course, direct incidents of plagiarism, very well known in the scientific history. But these things also happen accidentally. And one of the things I've seen quite often is the use of figures. And sometimes, because you've got so many of them and you're sorting through them, you might put the same figure in the same place, intending to replace it maybe later or just by accidental selection. So it's very easy to spot that with these tools. Other times, if you're the publishing side and you're concerned that you're getting low quality, perhaps plagiarized content, it helps to screen it on that way as well. And it can also, for those reasons, help identify predatory publishers. And I've been victimized by these. If you go look at my dissertation online right now, you'll find that it's written by somebody else. But of course, what it is somebody that's taken my dissertation link somewhere and wrapped it in their text online and put their name on it. So if they come up in the search windows when it's somebody's searching for the subject matter of my dissertation. There's not a lot I can do about it, but of course, if you're a publisher, you have legal staff that can probably assist you with these things. So it's important that you be able to find these items, and it's really obviously unreasonable to expect that anybody's going to search through the entire internet on a daily basis to do this. So I think that's a couple of really big benefits for both authors and publishers. So sort of maybe not ranking them in your priority, but in some sort of order, these tools help you to reveal trends and patterns for essential research, which is really essential. And that's all the fundamental first step of a literature review is. Screening a huge volume of information, of publications of various kinds, presentations, potentially PDFs, documents, almost all of it online now, and then putting it into some sort of order. On the publishing side, and potentially for your side as the author, and some journals allow you to suggest reviewers, you can identify reviewers that maybe you weren't able to find, and this is a very challenging thing to do because most scientists tend to focus their work very narrowly, which means there's not a lot of them out there. So if you're working in a very esoteric space, you might have a handful of potential reviewers, and of those, a few might have time for you. Plagiarism is a big issue, not just from the author's perspective, self-managing their own publications, but from the idea that this is my intellectual property. I want to make sure that if somebody's using it outside the domain of my work, that they're referencing and using it properly or compensating me somehow. Identification of funding sources is huge. There's more and more of these every year, and of course, there's a lot of them that have been traditionally funding that are no longer viable. So you want to keep that list fresh. This is a tedious thing. I had research students, sometimes that was one of their minimal task assignments was to periodically go out and do this for us. Being able to do it electronically saves time for my research assistant, puts them back in the field doing what they like to do better. And also, of course, identifying flawed reporting statistics and data fabrication. That's both on your side and their side. The worst thing you can do, I think the worst mistake you can make as a scientist from a publication point of view is send out a faulty manuscript. We circulate that among our collaborators, among all the contributors repeatedly to try to get that right. But mistakes, we're all human and mistakes do happen. So there's, like I said, two perspectives for this discussion: the perspective of the author and the publication, the publisher. And the author really has kind of two sub perspectives, right? Because one is I'm writing, and the other is I'm researching. So it helps in both those fields as well. So journal selection. How are you going to, as a poor student at public schools, my first objective when I was doing literature review is to find one where I could get the full text. So it used to be we would go to a thing called the library, which had these amazing things which were called books, and you could actually pull them off the shelf, read through these condensed collections of journal articles, and then if they were on microfiche, maybe even in the old school way, you could take them down and have the librarian copy them for you. So you could get copies of the journal articles that way. Nowadays, it's all online, obviously, but I still want the full journal, full text journal, not just the citations or the abstracts. So just that one filter can be of a huge benefit. Now, obviously, you want to match it for your subject matter interest, and then within that, perhaps subcategories, because most scientific concerns have multiple perspectives, right? So I might be working on a problem in my domain, but other domains, sociology, psychology, physics, mathematics, have influenced and have interest in that domain. I want to bring articles from all those perspectives. So I also want to make sure that I know that this is a mathematically oriented paper. This is a paper that's oriented to the social sciences, perhaps, and then within that subcategories and on and on. So the reason why you want to do this, obviously, is to improve the quality of your manuscript, reduce the odds of rejection, save you time, but in my experience, save the time of your colleagues and your contributors, your research assistants if you're running a lab. All of that equals money. So obviously, you can also use this to locate articles, not just for your interest as a researcher, but as a publisher or as an author. I want to get my article into the most prestigious and specifically focused journal that I can. So the case in point at the bottom is very relevant, and bears mentioning here that not all journals are a good fit for your article, and doing a careful screen of that is going to save you a lot of embarrassment, perhaps in the long run, because ideally, you would like to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. Those typically require that you pay quite a bit of money. I mean, relatively speaking, we're talking about poor scientists here. And so it's very critical for that reason alone to get it right. But you want to be able to tailor your publication to its audience. A lot of times as a graduate student, my targets were non-curated journals or things like conferences, because I just wanted to put in a real quick paper, a description of a couple of my graphics and findings, just to get them out there, not necessarily a full-blown publication. There's all kinds of layers to this kind of investigation. So finally, you've decided where you want to publish, you've collected some of your research, now you want to start writing. And this is also a very tedious thing for most of us, even for somebody like myself who likes to write. I like to do the creative side of writing. The part where I've got to manage margins and templates, not so much fun. I personally used a thing called LaTeX. When I wrote my dissertation, was a huge help. I could plug R, the analytical language that I was writing in, directly into LaTeX, and the text was beautifully formatted. I could make changes very subtle changes very quickly. But I had to have a lot of expertise to do this. So it took a long time. I won't say a long time, but there was a learning curve to learning LaTeX, because it is a very dense application. So once you've decided where you're going to publish, you have to get their template, their specifications, and then start trying to match your output to their guidelines. These guidelines include different kinds of specifications from the journal. That's sort of formatting issues, usually, with the kinds of things that you do to tables and images. There's editorial guidelines. Some of them can be very specific, especially those very prestigious journals. They don't need to stoop and bow to accept your work. You will sort of stoop and bow to get them to accept your work. So there's also a lot of rigorous detail in most submission procedures. Again, it's scaled according to, let's say, the quality of the journal. So those with higher quality will have higher standards. They have much. When I say higher quality, what I mean specifically is a wider dissemination to a discerning audience that is more accepting of the standards of that journal, simply because it has that tradition. All the way down to the micro journals that are basically publish yourself. You just stick it in there, and there's really no curation whatsoever. Also, there's copyright and ethical guidelines. Again, that touches on both intentional and accidental plagiarization. and use of non-licensed images, which is a big problem. I know this is a big problem, especially for graduate students. They just pull it off the internet, stick it in their presentations and put it up there without ever mentioning or listing on their slide that they borrowed it. In most cases, this is not a violation, strictly speaking, if you're using it this way, as long as you are putting somewhere on there that you did not create that you took it somewhere, but it's academic license, it still has to be referenced properly. And then artificial intelligence can also assist in the preparation of the draft of the scientific manuscript. And this is what I like the best, right? For those that big, say, if according to Zipf's law, say 80% don't and 20% do like to write. For that 80% and the 20%, it's nice to have a little double check if you're really good at it. But for the 80% that really hate writing, and there's a spectrum, those that really hate it and those that'll tolerate it, really don't mind it, they just don't want to do it much. And then within that spectrum, there's a lot of things that artificial intelligence nowadays can do, especially natural language processing tools that can help us significantly, not only formatting the text as far as the physical layout, but doing things like assessing language, first person versus other voices, and active versus passive, very simple for a machine to spot and correct even. And then based on experimental data, AI software can also provide a structured draft for those authors to edit and develop further if you really want to just. So I think there's kind of two schools of thoughts here. Is I want to create the initial draft and then have something help me clean it up, right? I like that upfront control, but I don't like the messy part on the back end. The other school of thought is, man, I really don't like putting it, I don't mind doing the editing on the back end, but I don't like putting it together. So there's tools that you can use to do a real basic rough draft that's actually quite good these days. And then all you do is read it for language and particular details is sort of suited with your work. So there's, levels of accommodation, I'm sure, levels of capability, levels of cost, I'm assuming as well. If you're somebody like me, you could potentially write these tools very quickly, by the way, on something like AWS using their services. It's also almost free for the scope of very small projects. So if you have those skills, you could do it yourself and then maybe create a product and become the next big guy in this business. But it's a wide open field. The tools are still in development. So the second second aspect of this discussion as far as enhancing your writing quality as an author is that there are a growing number of tools that can actually provide certain stylistic accompaniments to your writing. So we have these things called auto-encoders, generative models, where I can take a photograph and run it through these things, and suddenly it looks like Rembrandt painted it, which is really cool. But the equivalent in the literary domain is also available. The grammar checkers are not what they used to be. I started writing many years ago, back before I actually started writing on a typewriter, if you must know. And then we had these specialized things called word processors, and now we call them Office Suite tools. But the grammar checkers have been getting better and better over the years. But the tools that we're using now are not simple rule-based algorithms. These things are actually incorporating these new artificial intelligence tools, and they're much more effective. So they can do a lot more identification of problem space for you, but they can also do a lot more correction for you. Of course, I still have trouble splitting out there, and there, right? With the EIR and the ERE and the EY, possibly RE. Still some spots where it's not going to be perfect, but for you, for those of you that don't like to write, that don't feel very confident in it because you don't do it a lot, it could be a big boon. It could just be this confidence check when you send out your manuscript that said, I did the best I could do, because sometimes that's all that you can do when it comes to the use of language, grammar, usage, punctuation. I mean, what is the subject of the verb, and etc. Most of us don't spend a lot of time in that realm. So you can use these tools to triage the paper, as already indicated, edit the language, identify all the irregularities that we've already discussed. You can also use it to screen missing information, ethics statements, patient's consents, etc. Because basically these tools are really good at, these NLP tools are really good at a couple of different things. One of them is looking at the big picture formatting. If you're supposed to have the authors list and then the associated academic or whatever professional institutions list, and you switch that around, you could see those kinds of things easy, missing Missing components are also very easily identified. These are the kinds of things you don't see for looking at the forest. You can't see the trees sort of issues. So it's very, again, if nothing else, it can provide an excellent confidence check at the end of the publication process. And of course, these things are getting more and more capable. So the idea that they can identify within the document, that's the sort of take it from the macro to the micro picture, problems with things like your ethics statements, patient consents, your methods. You've been inconsistently using terminologies. You know, chemicals often have multiple names, especially very familiar chemicals. I like to be consistent when I'm writing. If it's a certain kind of chemical, I like to call it that name throughout, not by its various different names, because it's confusing, you know, and it's an easy mistake to make because a lot of times we write these papers in phases, so months, maybe years apart. We might change our language over time. So also, deceptive cases of academic fraud, especially involving things like data and images, are very easily identified with these tools. I actually had a personal experience with one colleague using images of another colleague. It became a big brouhaha. I won't comment whether it was ethical concerns involved, but it ultimately boiled down to the two of them had very closely related file systems that had very similar names. They were stored without security, so one could see the other, and it could have been a potential case of confusion. So whether it's intentional or non-intentional, bad things happen. So how does AI help the journals, publishers? And you may be wondering, why do I care about this if you're not a publisher? Most publishers deal with authors, so they understand that side of the discussion, but authors may be not understanding, why do I need to think about what a publisher goes through? Well, that's your target audience. If I'm writing a proposal to a particular scientific entity, they have, funding entity, they have their focus. I want to write to that focus, or I'm just wasting my time. So I also, as a scientist within a collaborative group, become a publisher. For one thing, if I'm working with my graduate research assistants or fellows, I'm usually the guy that reviews all their work before it goes out to the collaborators that they're working with and it's coming out of my lab. So in a sense, I am a publisher. So what can these tools do to help us here? They can reduce the time of a publication, obviously, by streamlining the most basic reviews. Do you have your author list in the right place? Those kinds of things. It can enhance the author experience. If you find the task, the manual task of authorship tedious, then the software may be automated to the point where you actually begin to enjoy it. You focus on the parts that you like, and you don't have to do the parts you don't like so much. It can obviously improve editorial quality for a lot of different reasons based on the semantics and systematics or syntax of the document, as well as things like plagiarization, as we already talked about, which means that you can get the publication to market faster as both an author and a publisher. You can get better budget predictability because human problems tend to be messy and fuzzy and non-definite, whereas the performance of an algorithm is fairly deterministic. So if I put a document of a certain size and I run 1,000 of those, I know about how long it's going to take to analyze that. It's not going to vary because they've had a bad day or they wrecked their car, or they're sick. Also, it reduced, for obvious reasons, overall costs from acquisition to publishing. It can improve the publisher's in-house staff productivity because, again, even though you are a publisher and you have editors on your staff, there's things that people like to do and don't like to do in their job. And if they can use the tools to sort of balance that a little bit so that they're much more engaged and much more interested in what they're doing, because they can spend more time doing what they like and less doing what they don't like. And of course, it can boost the immediacy of science because all of these things come together to make a much more efficient scientific marketplace. So, peer review. What is peer review? Just to be clear, this is the process where you take a scientific publication and you pass it around to experts and, this is important, non-experts. That's the part a lot of people forget. The experts are going to look at it and check the technical quality of your work. Hey, I don't agree with your theory necessarily, but I do like the way that you've done this, except for this one step seems a little questionable. And if you could resolve that, I'd feel a lot better about your overall theory too. But of course, there's also the problem of establishing who's going to do that peer review process and what their guidelines are. So potentially think of these artificial intelligence tools as your peer reviewer, right? And the nice thing about that is it's going to be objective both to the technical and non-technical audience, because like I said, the thing that a lot of us forget is to take that article and put it in front of somebody that's not in the field. So you don't want to put it in front of a fifth grader, probably, if you're doing high-level scientific work, unless it's a very intelligent fifth grader. I've met some of those. But you might want to put it in front of a scientist in a different field, an engineer. I've always enjoyed having engineers read my work because they're very meticulous about the equations and the data points. And then, of course, somebody in a literary field would be good too, right? Just review it for the quality of the language. Look, you switch voices. You're active, passive, right? So it can be used to evaluate the manuscript. It can be used for mechanical things like extracting key terms for originality and relationship matching. By the way, if you've ever had to parse out your manuscript or a manuscript of any kind for keywords, is that fun? I mean, every single in a scientific manuscript, you want to say all of these are keywords, right? Except for the fundamental language in it. So, but the question is, what are the keywords that are going to bring the right audience to your text and to your journal if you're a publisher? And so check for language quality issues, identification of plagiarism, optimizing editorial workflows, and we'll talk about one of those here at the end of the discussion. Match papers to journals and reviewers, which like I said, is not always an easy thing to do, not just because there's a few of them out there, but because few do take the time to be a peer reviewer. If you're not a collaborator and they're not getting paid, they do this to stay current. I mean, that's why I typically do it. I get a little kudo, a little cheese at the end when they put my name as a reviewer, but I do it typically to stay current in my field, see what the other guys are doing. I can also use to calibrate reviewer scores to reduce bias. If we're working in the data science business, we know about normalization, and it's sometimes very compelling to look at something that's a big, huge difference and say, wow, that's phenomenally impressive. But when you normalize it, the difference disappears. So it's important to take that human subjective quality score and somehow equate it to one another. And they can check for partly described methods, invalid, confusion, missing data, components of the template, that kind of thing. So to wrap up, illustration here just sort of puts it all together in a single point. AI tool and peer review. This is the workflow that I mentioned previously. This is called, I'm not sure exactly how they pronounce this, but I will call it eVice, as I'm going to assume they mean it kind of like advice, but it's created by Elsevier. I sometimes can say it, sometimes can't. And it's basically built to replace their outdated editorial system and support the editorial process that they have to undertake for their publications and speed up the whole overall process. So some of these things, obviously, well, all of these things, once upon a time, were all done manually. So before the internet, if you were sent your publication into a journal, and this was why before the internet there were a lot fewer of them, you absolutely, were staking the claim that you were a peer-reviewed publication, you absolutely had to have somebody that, much like they do in the patent office, take the article and then go out and research current publications in the literature from other journals of other authors to make sure that you're not repeating something. And if you see, a big picture, oh, this article and this article sound alike, put them together, then they had to go, text by text, highlight the parts that, are actually word for word copied or whatever, the images. Very tedious. Software can do this quite readily and very quickly. It's been around, plagiarisms or the checkers have been around for a long time. I wrote one 20 years ago for a class that little coursework that I was teaching, and all it did was take their article, bust out the big words, use them as keywords, and then just do an internet search, and then find the top rated documents and then just compare them together. How much are they alike as you go through them, and just give a score. They're much more, and I wrote that in a couple of days in ASP.NET for a web browser, but they're obviously a lot more capable than that these days. So when we talk about plagiarism checking software, we're talking about something that can be very substantial. Beware, by the way. So automatically can prepare things like the correspondence among the parties involved. I don't know exactly how they've implemented this, but I've also done this many times. Essentially, you're talking about a workflow, something like SharePoint, for example. If you're a Microsoft user, can be used to do this. So you just have, checkpoints along the workflow. Once this person gets done, signs off on it, sends out that burst of emails or writes those number of letters, and then moves it to the next person in the line. And the reason why that's important is obviously people take vacations. Back in the old days, papers get dropped, they fall behind desks. Things don't get moved from one outbox to another inbox. So this happens electronically as well these days. These automated workflows simply ensure those checkpoints along the way are checked. And then the tedious stuff is done. And the worst thing you can do is send out a thank you letter to an author and put somebody else's name in the author slide or misspell their name. So if you've got it in the system correctly in your database, I'm assuming correctly, and you've got the author to approve all that point, from that point forward, when you use that same name, it's been vouchsafed, and you know that it's at least as right as anybody said it was, and nobody complained so far. But if you're having to hand key this or copy and paste, doing these tedious operations can incur errors of a very significant nature. So it can do things like send decision letters to the authors. I would imagine that, from my perspective in data science, that these decision letters can be automated to a greater or lesser degree. The decision may be completely automated. I reviewed your paper for all these things that we've talked about, and without even looking at it, I can say it's not in my field, or the quality isn't good enough. You can probably do a lot of rejections up front, and then sort of spend your time on the acceptances that you really want to focus on. You can also use it to do things like invite alternate reviewers. And I'm assuming, again, the database is probably quite extensive. It has past and potential reviewers in it, so that somebody that has done work in the past, isn't currently signed a paper, can quickly be called upon to fill that gap. And again, this is something that can't be overstated, because this is a negotiation process, right? But if you already have them in your system and you've already done that negotiation process, and you can use these systems to rapidly and automatically identify and assign those tasks, man, that's just a huge, and it's a big thing. It's a big boost for the reviewer as well, because it can be very tedious to have to go, oh God, I got to answer another email. I'm in the middle of publishing here myself, right? I can also do things like send thank you letters to reviewers, and man, you're going to say, oh, what? That's a very trivial thing. Let's just forget that. In the manual process, those are the kinds of things at the end of the process that you say, look, we're starting a whole new thing. We don't have time. Let's just skip that part. Well, that's the part that really gets you, brings back repeat reviewers, repeat authors, repeat business of various kinds, and it also endears you to them. When you talk about winning hearts and minds, and I really like that journal. They took care of me from the beginning, and they never forgot. It communicates with other programs to check things like the profile, scientific performance, conflicts of interest of viewers, ad infinitum. But I would think the big thing here would be what they call SEO. I don't know what they call it more recently, but search engine optimization, right? Because these things are typically going to get published in a paper journal if you're on the high end, so-called. But they're most often also going to end up online, typically in the paid journals as abstracts and citations only. So you've got to have very expensive, by the way. These things can cost tens of thousands of dollars per seat access. Just to get access to something like Elsevier can be quite prohibitive from a capital point of view. And so managing these things can be very critical. Finally, it can do things like provide reminders to your reviewers. I myself have been subjected to these reminders. I have 20 or 30 applications for a prestigious fellowship that I have to review by Saturday, for example. I mean, I have my own reminders in my calendar to keep doing that until it's done. But obviously, things get left by the wayside. And if you've got a 30-day deadline and it's 21 days into that, you really would like to know, am I going to get this from you in the next 9 days? Because I could go back to the other error point here and get an alternate reviewer if you suddenly become incapacitated or too busy. And of course, suggestion of reviewer is also very helpful. So I've talked to quite a few aspects of AI tools that are used today to help improve the quality of both your authorship and your publication stream. If you have any questions, I hope you'll ask them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stephen. I think we will go through these slides about the tools that we have to offer for authors specifically, which would help the authors really get published faster. Like Dr. Stephen was explaining, we have 3 tools to explain, take you through. One is Trinka, which is focusing on the language quality part, which is writing assistance. Then Author1.ai, which is focused on helping you understand the manuscript's readiness for journal submission. And an open access journal finder, which will help you identify the right journal for your paper. So let's dive into Trinka first. Trinka is the only AI writing assistant that makes academic and formal writing easy, and it's customed custom built for academic writing. Unlike other tools in the market like Grammarly or maybe a Perfectit or a Ginger, Trinka has been specifically trained on academic content, about 1.3 million papers from different genres. This makes it unique, and it basically it gives it the ability to understand the academic nuances within the academic writing con. Just to give you a brief background, Trinka comes from the house of Inago. So we have about 15 years of age-old experience, having worked with authors globally and with publishers as well. And that also obviously goes into how we have built Trinka and the expertise that we have to really rely on. So in terms of improvements that Trinka can offer, Trinka can obviously improve the tone, the grammar, the spellings, of course. But apart from that, we have also built in unique features which help in reducing your word count so that you can meet the journal guidelines, which are stringent sometimes. Sentence structure, unbiased language, and then technical phrasing and vague language usage. Now, these obviously go towards making your manuscript a little more polished, giving it a more formal appeal. And finally, our spelling system is again advanced. It understands the contextual differences between, let's say, a from and a from in general text, and also between such words, confusing words, which sound similar, but then they are spelled differently, even in academic context. And finally, Trinka also has unique features that help in journal submission towards preparing a manuscript towards journal submission. For example, Trinka is capable of offering you subject area based corrections, which would mean that if you're writing a paper in cardiology, you can tell Trinka that you're writing a paper in cardiology. The suggestions that you will receive will be in tune with the subject. You will also offer a consistency check similar to most tools in the market, again, with a bent towards academic writing, which help you achieve the consistency that you need for a final submission. And for authors to save their time, we have a unique feature called Auto Edit, which lets you upload a Word document and receive all the edits in one shot in the document itself in track changes. And finally, the publication checks help you understand your manuscript's readiness across 22 different checkpoints, which I will demonstrate to you in the slides. In the Trinka product, in fact, indeed. So what I'm going to show you right now is a quick look at the Trinka writing platform. This is the marketing website, or the your website where you will have to go to understand what Trinka offers. That's trinka.ai. You can register for free or log in. And once you do log in, you will be taken to your My Drive where you can upload a file. Once you do upload a file, the file becomes available for you to really go through all the errors that the AI system is suggesting. Like I mentioned, Trinka is specifically trained for academic content, about 1.3 million documents of different subject areas. That gives it the edge that it really needs to work best with academic content. The experience is very simple. All you need to do is just go through the underlined words which indicate a possible error and make the corrections by clicking the correction suggested on the right-hand side. You will also see that there would be explanations given to you for the change, so you understand why the change is necessary. And at times you will also see multiple options coming from the AI system. The changes can obviously vary from just being grammar and spelling corrections to those towards making your text concise or maybe more formal sounding, or even to basically adhere to a style guide. We have style guides built into Trinka. So if your journal prefers a particular style guide, you can choose for the American Medical Association or American Psychological Association, etc. And that is automatically applied to your document, which makes the entire compliance to journal guidelines very easy. And finally, you can also customize your writing type. If it's academic writing, you can tell Trinka that you are writing an original article or a case report, or even choose from the automatically directed subjects for your paper. Once you've done that, you will see suggestions coming to you in a more customized fashion. Similarly, we have the consistency checks, which will analyze the entire document to identify inconsistencies like use of different number formats, between spelled out numeral or number in digits, or spelling variations between British and American, which can be taken care of in one simple click. So that's how Trinka can actually make writing a lot more easier. And then polishing your manuscript before journal submission a lot more easier. These are some examples of different subject areas we have Trinka can work with, and a few examples of how it really adds value to your language. Trinka is also available as as an MS Word add-in within the Word application on Windows, and you can also use Trinka on the Chrome browser as an extension, or the Firefox browser as an extension, and on Edge as well. And of course, Trinka is available on the web as trinka.ai. Now let's talk about Author1. Author1 is our manuscript evaluation system that basically incorporates the ethical and different technical checks which Dr. Stephen was talking about in the earlier slides. The system can perform over 60 different checks using AI technology to give you a quick assessment of where your manuscript really stands as far as generic requirements for publication are concerned. You will get a report which indicates a readiness score as well, so it's easy for you to understand the effort involved in making it ready. The product uses AI technology and of course the editorial intelligence we have gathered over years and by working with publishers as well. And this is a quick look at the different kind of checks you will see on the Author1 platform. Of course, there is a writing quality check, and then after that, you will also be able to see how well your manuscript matches the scope of the journal that you're targeting. Then the keywords that you can use to make it more visible after it's published, so you get more views on your research. And similarly, it can generate a summary for your manuscript, so you can share it across social media or any other platform that you will want your paper to get visibility on. And plagiarism check as well. We use Authenticates, which is the gold standard plagiarism check that you will get on the Author1 platform. And finally, we have the other technical and ethical checks as well, which I will show you in a quick demonstration right after. Let's take a look at the Author1 platform. Once you log in, which is through author1.ai, you will be greeted to this dashboard where you can see all the reports that you have processed and also upload a new one. You can choose between the basic and which is free offering and the premium offering, which obviously gives you the full report with all the checks that the AI system can do and also the plagiarism check as well. Once you have processed the files, you will see the links for the report, of course, and I have opened a report for you to take you through quickly. The report will be sectioned on the left-hand side with different sections that are, the checks are categorized into. You will see the title of the paper that has been fitted by the AI system automatically, along with the word count, the figures and tables in it, and the author names and whether the author correspondence email has been present. You will see the overall description of whether your paper meets the requirements for generic publication requirements or whether it needs change, and a quick summary of the 4 major checks we do, including language, scope match with the journal target, and plagiarism check, and finally ethical compliance with a numerical score. As you go further, you will see in detail all the sections where the AI system has generated the report for you to understand your manuscript's readiness. Starting with the summary, which you can use to quickly gather the sentences which are the highlight for your paper. Then with concepts, which can be used also as keywords. Based on the concepts and the summary that the system identifies, further checks are performed. Finally, the keywords. The system is capable of detecting the keywords that you provide in the paper automatically, and it can also suggest other keywords which will help. If you see, there's also a mesh tag, which means that these are keywords which are indexed on the mesh repository to meet some of the requirements that biomedical journals can have. Finally, the journal scope check within this section, which is if you have chosen a target journal during upload, in which case is for the Medical Journal of Cairo University, your paper does not match, or whether how much it matches, the system will be able to tell you instantly. Additionally, the system will also suggest alternative journals that will help you triage which ones to really submit to next. Then we have the language quality section, which will give you a numeric score of how well the paper's language really fits the academic writing requirements. And you will also get a quick look into the different kinds of errors that are present in the paper. So for example, 9 article corrections or subject verb corrections, and the corrections are indicated as well. Then we have the plagiarism check, which will be through the Authenticate report, as I mentioned. Once you click on this link, you will be taken to the Authenticate report, which will obviously give you the entire report for the content that has been matched and against which source. So you can cite the sources if necessary and avoid unintentional plagiarism. Then we have the ethical compliance checks, which will give you a quick overview of whether your paper meets these requirements. For example, informed consent not present in a document, or the ethical statement is not present in the document as well, but the document does contain these financial disclosure, and the conflict of interest again is absent. This obviously helps in quickly analyzing your paper's readiness for these ethical requirements which journals have. Then finally, the technical compliance section will give you a structural understanding of how well the paper is ready for submission, starting from the author names being declared in the paper to the affiliations and whether the correspondence details are present or not. And then finally, this the abstract till the front matter, whether you have the abstract within the range which is usually preferred or whether it is structured or unstructured. Then the different sections used within the paper and the references as well. Interestingly, the system will also be able to tell you whether the references are old or new. So you can avoid peer review criticism for old references, which weaken your argumentation. Then finally, for figures and tables as well, you'll be able to see if there are any missing citations in the paper. That concludes the author one over platform overview. And finally, we have the open access journal finder, which helps in really identifying the journal which will be best suited for your paper. The system is basically trying to understand the concepts that you have used within your manuscript and also the associations between these to identify the paper so identify the journal which is best suited. And it has published, different articles in the same, with the same concepts in the past. To give you also a sense of confidence that this paper is well suited for that journal that you're targeting. It's pretty easy to use. The moment you add your abstract here and with your email address, you'll be able to use the tool for free and get the results. I will show you a quick demonstration. So for the abstract that I've pasted here, I will just have to click on Find My Journal, and you will see that the worldwide journal set that I've selected, I am getting suggestions for foot and ankle orthopedics for this particular abstract. You will also get insights into what the process for peer review looks like. This journal operates a double-blind peer review process, and the article processing charges, and the typical publication speed that usually the journal takes, and also the confidence index. And you also see the keywords that have tallied against the abstract you have pasted in the journal that has published in the past, the subject area under which your paper or your abstract really falls in. And you will also find useful links for the author instruction page, the review process page, and the journal scope page, or the editorial board page as well. And as you will see, you will get multiple suggestions ranked based on the confidence system generates or sees with your paper between the match between the abstract you have pasted here and the journal's past publications. You can also choose between different regional databases, for example, JSTATE for Japan and CUAG for China. That concludes our session. Before I close, just a quick overview of the OJF's unique points. As you had seen, you will get obviously these different suggestions for different journals that will match your match your content, and will obviously give you more confidence of whether the journal scope is matching with your paper's research or your research that you have conducted. And the system is designed with safeguards in place for data safety. We do not really, the AI system is exclusively reading your content, and the content is discarded right after. That's a quick look. We have a large database of about 5.5 million articles. And of course, there is segregation for different databases, as you had seen, between the worldwide DOAJ and JSTATE for Japan, and similarly CUAG for China. Right. So that concludes the different session for different tools we have available for authors. And I would really request you to try all of these out. You can avail all of these for free. And I'm pretty sure you'll find benefit and really using all of these tools to your publication process.